Hello and welcome to a live Deprogram with Keri Smith. Good to be here, and I hope you're getting ready for a fun weekend. A lot of stuff going on. It's the beginning of the year, and there's so many things happening already. I appreciate you guys being patient with being accommodating with the new start time for the live show, so I can get some of these gig jobs in that I've taken on this year. And it's good to see you. Robert is here. Give it up for Robert, one of the mods. I see Therese. I have a quick announcement that I'm bringing on. I have a co-host today. It's like the old days. I'm bringing on a guest co-host. It's been a while since I've had co-hosts on the live shows. But I'm very excited about today's co-host. First, let me just tell you this. All the wrong knitters in the chat. I know some of you are going to this event. It's the Knitty McPurley retreat. It's happening the weekend of February 1st, and it's happening in Grapevine, Texas. And Ann Pinkava from Politically Incorrect Knitters was so kind as to tell me, look, there's a lot of us that are going to be in Texas. Why don't we get together and do something? So we are going to do something. There's a break in the schedule, the knitting schedule, on Saturday, February 1st. And so we're going to have a deprogrammed meetup, and it's going to be at 12:30. We're meeting for just conversation, coffee, crepes. We're going to meet at the Sweet Paris Creperie, which is in South Lake, and there's the information there right on the screen. It's at 228 State Street. There's no tickets or anything. Just come and say hello. And yeah, I know I'm going to get to see Anne and a bunch of you guys in person for the first time. I'm pretty excited about that. And I asked Knitty McPurley, do you need help selling tickets for the retreat? And she was like, no, no, you guys are so great. You sold it out a long time ago. So anyway, I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be a lot of fun. We just put this together. I hope to see some of you there. And even if you're not going to the retreat and you're in the Texas area and you want to come hang out, that's where we'll be. There'll be a lot of wrong knitters there. Okay, let me take this off the screen. As I said, I'm very excited for the guest co-host today. I recently got to interview him. His name is Mikale Olson. He's a Christian writer, a podcaster. He writes a lot for The Federalist. And we were kind of messaging this morning about some stuff that's going on online. And I was like, why don't you just join me? I used to have guest co-hosts all the time. We could just talk about this stuff together and see if we can figure out what's happening together. And so I'm just very grateful that he said yes. Please welcome the real Mick Olson.
Good to
Hello.
be here.
I'm glad to have you.
Yeah.
I see in the background there, it looks like I'm not the only one that hasn't taken down my Christmas decoration.
Yeah, this is in the base. I need to like set up, I need to build something because this is just in the grungy basement here. And these are lights that have been there for years and I just never moved them. And
Oh, I see. They've
so
always been there.
this is the best studio setup I got so far.
Well, I love it.
But
Just like I said, I'm just grateful you could join us on short
yeah.
notice, and tell people where they can find you if they haven't watched the interview with you and if they're not familiar.
Just so on Twitter at real Mick Olson there, as tagged here. And then from there, I have a link tree and you'll see what I've written for Christian Post or Federalist. I'm also, I should maybe later today, if not early next week, officially signing a contract with Not the Bee to start writing over there. So
That's
that'll
so
be cool.
exciting.
So that'll be linked as well in the link tree once I get that rolling. So you guys can check that out. And then my YouTube link is in there as well. So yeah.
Not the Bee is and the Bee both.
Yeah.
I think are two of the best publications right now.
I agree. And they keep it light and fun, but they deal with topics that are needed to discuss and all that stuff. So
Yeah. Very cool. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that. Let's just jump right into it. This morning I just started noticing, as a lot of people were noticing, I guess, that there seemed to be a lot of so-called conservative podcasters, or influencers, whatever you want to call them, ones with very large platforms who are suddenly pushing this new communist China app called Red Note. And I
yeah.
want to just put a couple of these so people know what we're talking about. I'm just going to put a couple of these on the screen. Let me see. I've got to stop sharing this. There we go. Okay. Thanks for bearing with me. So this is the Candace Owens one. She says, "Hi, I joined this app yesterday after the Gen Z revolt against TikTok censorship. Okay, so she's joining this CCP app, a communist app, to oppose censorship, is what she's saying. Unfortunately, I've not yet
It's just
her in.
like
So I
it
would
feels like a Babylon Bee article, but it's actually real. Like, this is
right,
so ridiculous.
right, and it's like you know, if somebody could teach me how to navigate this,
Unbelievable.
and then I can't say his name. Who did she tag there?
I don't know how to pronounce that either.
Yeah.
I'm not a Chinese spy, so I don't know how to say these things.
And then so she's basically promoting this to her audience as like, "Hey, get on this app. This is how you protest censorship." And this guy, I don't know him, but he had a really just dead on take. He says, this guy Hans Shotney, he says Candace Owens is rebelling against government censorship by joining the text notes tightly controlled Red Note app with deep connections to the Chinese Communist Party. And then he says the stupidity of this woman will never cease to amaze me. And this is the one bone I have to pick with him. I wonder what you think about this. I don't think she's stupid. I think she knows what she's doing.
Money. It's money. I don't think I agree. I think that at a certain level, well, I would say this. I think she's stupid in the sense where she thinks this is a winning strategy for herself.
Yes.
So, and that's kind of the laughable stupidity of all these tyrants, and whether it's these conservative social media influencers or people on big networks or whoever it might be, politicians, is they think by joining the bad guys, they're going to actually win in the end. It's like I don't know if it was Winston Churchill or somebody said that, people that join tyrants do so because they think that the crocodile is going to eat them last. And I think that's kind of what I would assume someone like Candace is thinking or operating under. She just wants to be on the team that she thinks is going to win. And sure, they might win in the short term, as we've obviously seen tyrants win in the short term, but in the long term, they're always revealed for what they really are. They're always exposed and brought down. And I think justice is going to win in the end. And so good luck, Candace.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Oh my gosh. Let me just answer. Hey, Dion, Queen of Quotes says, she isn't being sarcastic? No,
she's not. That's the crazy part.
That's the crazy part. And the thing is, there are lots of people who follow these so-called conservative influencers who with these large platforms, who they are the ones who I wouldn't say maybe not stupid, but are being very naive, and they're falling for this tribalism thing where, look, let me just tell you, I have people in my comments who are saying to me, I don't care. China's not my enemy. Let me put one of these on the screen. This is what's happening is here, look at this. I don't care. China's not my enemy. The left.
Let me guess. The Jews are.
Right.
Or Israel is.
It's like all this. This guy doesn't get into the Jews, but he does say his enemy is the left, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and so I'm like,
China is the left.
It is the left. What is wrong with you?
They are the Chinese Communist Party. They are Maoists and Marxists through and through. And we're going to sit here and act like we're opposing the left, or speaking of this guy, by applauding China, of all places. It's as ridiculous as applauding Stalin's Soviet Union and then saying you're against Marxism. It's absurd.
Crazy. And he's not the only one. I have people in my Facebook comments, and they're saying these are people who call themselves conservatives, and they're saying, no, she's opposing censorship by promoting the Red Note app. Let me tell you the name of this app, you guys. If you don't know this, this is a tweet from Zvan Fleet, who is a loud voice against woke, against communism, who escaped communist China. And she's like, look, the name of this app literally means the little red book. It's named after Mao's little red book. That's the name of the app. She says the Chinese social media is heavily censored by the CCP. The so-called TikTok refugees will learn this the hard way. And the China they see on the app is the China that they are allowed to see. So far, there is no separate version for foreigners, but there will probably be one soon, as the CCP would not want its Chinese subjects to have direct interaction with foreigners who might introduce, quote, dangerous ideas. And she's pointing out, look, Kim Iverson, another huge platform.
Oh, she's the worst.
Yeah, so-called
Sorry, Kim.
conservative, but look at her. She says, she goes a step further than Candace. She says, I just downloaded this new Little Red Book app. Banning TikTok is going to massively backfire. This app is showing Americans a completely different view of China. It's obvious that China is the new world. You
Oh,
guys,
she's getting paid. She's getting paid. No question about it. I mean, I don't have evidence in front of me here, but if it came out that all of these people doing this are getting a lot of money, because think about it. I think we talked about this last time, where when we talked about bots and bot farming and what's going on with this and how many of this is legitimate, how many of this is foreign interaction with our media, with our alternative media, social media, whatever. I think that like this is true, that China's spending like, I think that the last number I read was like $16 billion a year or something like that to
wow.
push media influence in the West. And most of that is in the United States. And most of that is on social media platforms like X or Instagram or Facebook. And they're spending billions of dollars to do this. And so to assume that they're not paying off big accounts like Kim to push certain things here and there, I think I think it's pretty naive to assume that couldn't very well plausibly be happening. And so, and especially when you see these people constantly drip this kind of narrative, where, and especially when you see the hypocrisy. So you'll see them on one hand standing up against China because the whole COVID thing and blaming China for it, and they're all against China a couple years ago during COVID, and now all of a sudden, well, China's not so bad. We just haven't seen the right side of China. China's the new world.
Yeah.
What kind of a brave new world are we living in here online? It's very strange.
It's very strange. And allow me, Mick, to try and explain what I think is happening. And I don't know if I'm able to concisely articulate it yet, but I'm going to try. I was practicing with my husband of like, this is what's happening. So there are some people the majority of people probably, who are so plugged into and easily manipulated by and controlled by this whole right-left tribalism psyop,
Yep.
where all the establishment has to do, or all that influencers have to do, is push on that little left-right tribalism button, and a large percentage of people will go where they're told to go. This is what the right's doing now. This is what the left's doing now, and they'll go there. And I've seen this happen before, and I'm going to give an example of it happening on the left. At the beginning of the COVID policies, the authoritarian policies, before the media and the politicians and the celebrities had effectively pushed the left-right button and effectively spread the messaging of like, hey, it's just crazy right-wingers and Trumpers who were against the COVID policy. Before they effectively did that, you saw some leftists and progressives and people who think of themselves as liberal or progressive or however they think of themselves. They were rightfully protesting against the authoritarian COVID measures. In my little town of Georgetown, Texas, the biggest protests happening every Saturday were progressives protesting the mask mandates. These were hippies, natural medicine, natural health, people who cared about anti-pharma, big pharma. And then when the media pushed that, when they effectively did this psyop of like, no, the left is over here and the right's over here, the majority, not all, but the majority of people went to their corners. And so then this is how you can explain, like when you look at people who consider themselves on the left or progressives, and it's like, how in the world did they successfully manipulate and control these lefties and get them to shill for big pharma? How'd they get them to shill for authoritarianism? It's crazy. Well, it's because they said this is what the left's doing, and that is so powerful for most people, that they're like, okay, I'm with my tribe.
Because we're naturally tribalistic, and so if we identify with a certain tribe, and then the leaders of the tribe are telling us, well, this is now where this is what we believe now, even if it completely contradicts what we just did a second ago, most people will just, because we're not really clear thinkers, a lot of us will just go along with it. I mean, we see that again. This is what we're seeing on the right, I think.
So that's my point, is these people who are arguing with me in my comments and are trying somehow, it's like, how do you get conservatives who oppose wokeness, oppose leftism, oppose communism, supposedly, how do you get them to shill for communist China and the CCP? Well, you get a lot of influential people with huge platforms who they are now, tied to, who are like the tribal leaders of this is what the right is doing now. And you've got all the majority of people, like, it's at some point, potentially, it seems, could be drifting in this way where they're just like, don't attack my fave. That's my fave influencer. Like
Right.
it's so weird because if you are red pilled to the degree that you understand that the mainstream media, the cathedral media, is putting out propaganda and they can't be trusted, you can't give them absolute faith, then you should be discerning enough to be able to tell that, like, that's true for large and powerful alternative media figures as well. You shouldn't give them
Absolutely.
absolute faith. You shouldn't
Yep.
give me absolute faith. You
Right.
shouldn't give it, like,
And I think anyone demanding it is a fraud. And so this is something that I've noticed too with accounts like Candace Owens or other people that we're talking about here, is they talk with such dogmatism and like confidence in what they say. You see this with guys like Andrew Tate, even, where it's this like they're so sure about what they're saying and everybody else is wrong and they're right, and follow them because they're the only ones that have a clear path forward. That is like usually what frauds do and cult leaders and people that are not being honest. So people that are honest are going to approach issues, especially very complex geopolitical issues, or like a lot of this stuff that we're talking about here, with the idea of, yeah, you know what, there might be things that I'm wrong about. Don't follow me, look into it yourself, look into the evidence. I'm just here trying to shine a light on specific things that I'm seeing. I'm not painting myself as like the arbiter of all truth and everything that's good in this world, politically speaking. And so again, I think this is like bringing it back to more of the stuff that I write about and talk about, is like, I think this is why it's important for Christians to be grounded in what we're reading in the Bible, because it kind of separates everything it kind of puts everything then into its rightful place. We're not looking at celebrity pastors or social media influencers or legacy media or politicians as some like way forward for the truth and for what we should always be doing. We're not just blindly following anyone. In other words, we have a manuscript, literally, that instructs us in how to view the world and how to see things and how to weigh and measure everything. And it's a good litmus test to weed through a lot of the BS that we're seeing.
yes,
Um, and so if people aren't pointing you to that, especially people that are Christian nationalists and Christians, they're frauds. I think they're frauds. So
I couldn't agree more, and we're going to get into some of that too. We're not just going to talk about the weird phenomenon that's happening of suddenly people who, look, I know some people don't like the phrase woke right. I don't like the phrase either, but until another phrase becomes the most commonly used, that's how I'm going to refer to them, so you know what I'm talking about.
I
We're
like
going to
the
talk about
phrase in the sense that it gets these people mad and then they just expose themselves.
it's like, well, a lot of them are behaving like the woke.
Yeah,
I mean, you're
exactly.
supporting the Communist Party.
Supporting communist China, really focusing on like hegemonic race power structures
Yes.
and wanting to dismantle everything. And it's very much exactly the same, I think.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I've just a couple of things from the chat I wanted to point out. Selsworth says, in a video today, Ryan Macbeth predicted increased CCP propaganda in the US, particularly during the buildup for action against Taiwan. Thank you for that. I don't know who that is, but I appreciate that somebody's talking about that. And then Rodney says they speak with absolute confidence and dogmatism. Spot on, Mick.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's I was talking to a friend about this the other day, where it was particularly in regards to Andrew Tate, where I think the reason, and his strategy is what a lot of these people use, right? Where it's this, you have to speak like you're really sure about what you're saying. And most people then won't follow you because of the truthfulness or lack thereof of what you're saying, but simply because you're sure of what they're saying and they're unsure of themselves. So they'll follow someone that's sure, so that they kind of like through osmosis in a way feel confidence through the person that they're following, which
yes.
that's not in and of itself a bad thing. I think in a sense, this is what Christ is. He's someone that we follow, but Christ isn't just a confidence that we follow over there. He gives us his spirit. He gives us confidence ourselves, and he gives us the tools necessary to discern what's true and what's false. And so, but that's something that these people are not doing, right? They're not giving you tools to discern what's true and false.
No, they present themselves as saviors. Like Tate does. I am the strong man.
Right.
I'm going to lead you.
Exactly.
It's a Pied Piper leading young men is what I think. Let me show you this. So once again, just to point to the absurdity of anyone trying to say, yeah, I'm joining this communist Chinese app to oppose censorship. I'm doing it to oppose censorship. James Lindsay, he retweeted this tweet, and he says, "Don't believe the lying skanks that tell you that Red Note, the little red book, is showing people the real truth about China and the U.S." And so he highlighted this example, and this is a user called Dispropaganda, and Dispropaganda did a couple of tests over on Red Note. And he says, join Red Note, start posting. And then these are some of the things he posted. Taiwan is a country. Free Tibet. COVID came from China. The Uyghur concentration camps. Tiananmen Square massacre. Mao starved 45 million Chinese. And immediately, your account has been suspended.
Yeah, right. That's great.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I want to try this now. I really want to. Maybe I should join and we'll see. No, I'm not gonna do that. I can't
Don't
do
criticize Mao. Look, you better not. Oh, but if you're joining this little Red Note app, this communist Chinese
you're
app
for free speech.
right?
Like, okay.
I'm doing it to oppose censorship.
Yeah.
I don't get this, guys. Please tell me that those of you in my chat at least you can see through this crap, right?
It's such BS. Like, it's so obvious. Again, it goes back to this just cognitive dissonance that exists in so many people's minds, where they'll do one thing one day, and then literally the next day they're advocating for the exact opposite thing, or even in the same day or the same tweet. They're saying two different things. Like Candace Owens there, we're going to stand up against censorship and also join the CCP app. Like, what? And the craziest part isn't that someone like Candace Owens is saying that, because again, I think she's getting paid to say stuff like that, if I had to guess. The crazy part is that there's people falling for this. That's the insane thing to me. People, it blows my mind that people cannot see this. It's so obviously hypocritical.
It's the power of tribalism. I think that's what it has to be, is
Yeah.
because some of the people arguing with me today about it and saying, I don't care, China's not my enemy, I'm joining it to oppose censorship. Those people, I'm like, you're so easily controlled. And the thing is, you have to be aware. Like, I think about this all the time. The minute, if I catch myself thinking something prideful, like I would never be fooled by a psyop, the minute that happens, I would never be fooled by a psyop like those leftist COVID sheep, right? That's like, oh man, now I'm susceptible. Because the minute you start thinking you're not susceptible, it's like, man, that's when you're the most.
Oh, that's when you're the most susceptible.
Yeah, like it wouldn't happen to me. And I think a lot of those guys think like it's a lot of pride and arrogance and tribalism. It's just sort of like, I can see through BS while they're marching in lockstep with whatever the tribe leaders, these big platform places, are saying to do.
Yeah, it's wild. It again, it just blows my mind though that there's so many people that are falling for this stuff. And again, you're right to point out that it is the people who are so dogmatic about how they're the free thinkers and they're the truth tellers and they are the ones that resist tyranny and they're for free speech and they're for this and that. And yet these are the same people that are now arguing for the promotion of the CCP and the promotion of critical theory in various ways, and like this kind of post-liberal, anti-constitutional new American order. It's just like, isn't this everything that we just fought the left against?
Yes.
And now we're just doing it ourselves. We're becoming the very thing that the left has accused us of being for years. We're just becoming that.
We're becoming
that's what's happening.
So I've got a couple of tweets of yours pulled up here, and the ones that you sent me. Before we get to those, I want to, because this is a good segue into it. A lot of these large accounts, like Kim Iverson, like Candace Owens, they build up a lot of respect and trust during the COVID years by rightly, in my opinion, opposing authoritarian COVID policy. But now they're choosing to spend that respect, to spend it by telling their audience, in my opinion, very misguided, crazy stuff like, let's get a Chinese communist app. China's the new world. It's the future. Telling people, like pushing all this propaganda that's like not just critical of Israel. That's a different thing, but very anti-Jewish, like racist
Yeah.
stuff. And then they're also pushing this sort of this, I can't think of it in any other way, but this woke thing of like, you need to pick an identity group and promote that identity group. And there are people who are now repeating this stuff. Here's one that you
Yep.
sent me. Look at this.
Right. By the way, if anybody says China is the new world or China is the future, check their bank statement. I want to know where they're getting paid or who's paying them. Yeah, this one, this is based off of the first tweet that I sent you. There was a bunch of comments under it, and this is exactly the arguments that the left is making, where it's I don't know if
this one.
Yeah, this one. So scroll down to the picture. So this is like the caption is, this is what American churches, this is what the American church is, or this is what American Christianity, looks like. And then it's this picture of this white family from the 1950s and like this like old style church with the wooden pews, and the women are wearing bonnets and et cetera, right?
I love the bonnets, not gonna lie.
Here's the thing about this is this, and keep in mind, this is an account that has explicitly tweeted a lot of white nationalist stuff where he thinks that America is specifically for white people and made for white people, and therefore white people are the only people that should exist in this country. So, but then he'll post things like this all the time and hide his white identitarianism behind a thin veil of Christianity. And that's, I think, what's going on here. So the purpose of this isn't to promote a form of Christianity, but rather to promote a form of white identitarianism. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so then what you'll see is, and you see this in the replies, which is what those other tweets I brought up were, you'll see people automatically saying that if you don't agree with this, then you must hate white people. If you don't agree with our white identitarian political ideology, if you don't agree with white nationalism or ethnic nationalism or these types of things, then you must hate white people. You're brainwashed. You have boomer brain. You're falling for the leftist media propaganda, and you're betraying your own race, which is what this is, right? Why would you not stand for our community? As if I'm like an Uncle Tom to white people for not standing up for neo-fascist white nationalism. It's right. Exactly the same as BLM.
BLM.
It's exactly the same.
It's the same. I want to show you a tweet similar to yours. So you said here, this person says, it's because white people are being attacked on all sides. Why would we not stand for our community? White people community? And look, same thing.
What community is that? Exactly. I'd love to know.
Yeah, this person says to Colin Wright, you guys know Colin Wright, he's an evolutionary biologist. I've had him on the show before. And this guy said something similar to Colin Wright. He said, Colin, some of your staunchest supporters, me and others like me, are pro-white. You're not helping the anti-woke cause by pushing people like me out of your movement because we're pro-white. And Colin rightfully said, I'm not pro any particular race. I'm pro everyone. I'm pro individual. I totally reject group level identity politics. As of my followers who promote racial identitarianism, be it for whites or blacks or any other racial group, they should probably unfollow me. I'm not your friend or ally.
Right. Right. It's the whole ally argument. That's a good point where it's like the BLM, the leftists, the intersectional Marxists have their whole ally paradigm where if you're not part of it, it's like the white suburban middle-aged dad going on a BLM march, this anti-white BLM march. It's like, what are you doing here? He's trying to virtue signal that he's their ally, even though he's part of the group that the movement itself is pitting itself against. He's a white guy, and BLM is against white people very explicitly, but yet here's this white guy shilling for them, essentially. That's, I think, what you're seeing with a lot of these people is, I think a great example of that is Candace Owens. She's a black woman, but she's shilling for the white identitarians on the right.
Yeah.
It's like, or the CCP. Like, she's an ally to the Marxist communist left, I guess, because I think that's what it is ultimately. And it, again, it's not done for truthful reasons or for moral reasons. It's simply done, I think, for political power or influence of some kind, or money, which all
It
ties into
is,
that.
and it's very funny. So another one of these large accounts, supposedly conservative, supposedly Christian, built up a lot of goodwill and respect during the COVID years. In fact, I went on his show. It's Elijah Schaeffer. He's
Yeah.
saying the craziest, most overtly anti-Semitic. I'm not saying critical of Israel, guys. Quit being fooled for this crap. I'm
Yeah.
not criticizing him for criticizing Israel. I'm criticizing him
That's a good distinction.
for saying anti-Jewish crap.
Yes.
Um, and so he's been pushing all this. He's been pushing a lot of racist stuff. And so here's a recent one of his. And you guys know, if you've been here a while, you know Adam Coleman, friend of the show. And so he had something to say about this. Let me put this on the screen. You can see here, and this is a little video clip of Elijah Schaeffer declaring that Black people are not Americans. Black people.
Oh my goodness.
Black people are not Americans because they were originally slaves. And he says, quote, amendments were, yeah, amendments were made and there was adjustments that gave you citizenship and the right to vote, but it didn't make you an American. It just gave you citizenship here. And he goes on to say, America is only for white people. This is this whole,
That's exactly, yeah. This is what these people literally, I've been trying to explain this to people, that they don't just hate, that they don't just disagree with leftists in their in certain political conclusions. They don't just criticize the government of the nation state of Israel. They are race identitarians and racial
yes,
supremacists. And they literally think that if you're not an Anglo-Saxon white person, then you don't belong here. It's very simple. This is their worldview. This is their belief about national. So when they call themselves nationalists, Christian nationalists, and not everybody that uses that term fits in this category, but these people specifically who've kind of sort of co-opted the terms, this is exactly what they mean. When they say nation or national, they're talking about race or ethnicity, a race or ethnic group of people. And so when they're nationalists, they have this belief that each nation or group of people should be comprised to its own physical land, and there should be borders around it, and then no group should mingle with each other, specifically on racial lines.
yes,
That's what they believe.
that's
That's
what
what they
he's
mean by when they say nationalism.
That's
It's
what he's
crazy.
suddenly promoting now, and what's hilarious is Elijah Schaeffer is running in these same crazy circles with Candace Owens where they're posting all this anti-Semitic stuff,
Yeah.
and somebody I saw a couple people saying, "Wow, what's Candace Owens take on this? He's saying you're not an American. What is she going to say about this? Nothing. She's going to stay silent while he pushes it." And
Yep.
I'm just going to read you guys what Adam Coleman said. I know many of you guys follow Adam too. He was like, "Well, it was good while it lasted. I guess I'm not a real American. I was wrong this entire time. I appreciate the woke right for setting things straight for me. Next, Elijah will teach us about not committing adultery. Can't wait for that
Oh, that's
lesson
a
plan." It's a
yeah.
little
Little
burn
burn
there.
there to little Elijah, who definitely has been caught doing such things, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it's, again, it just shows these people don't actually, and this is the crazy part, with where someone like Elijah, who says this stuff repetitively on his podcast and on Twitter, he'll praise Hitler explicitly, I've seen
Yes.
several times as well.
Yes.
And it's like, these people, if they actually believe this, if Elijah actually believed this, that black people are inferior, that they're, as he calls them, the problem race in America, I've seen him explicitly
Yeah.
post that as well, then he wouldn't partner with Candace Owens.
Yeah.
But he's using Candace Owens for his own political advantage. It's all the relationships, in other words, between an Elijah Schaeffer and a Candace Owens is the same relationship that BLM has with certain allied white people. It's
Yes.
certainly to abuse them and to use them for their own purposes, and then
It's
to dump them when
transactional.
they get what they want. It's a
It's
transactional
absolutely
relationship.
transactional.
Yep. It's completely fraudulent.
And I don't believe, let me make a distinction in case I didn't make it clear earlier. I don't believe the big platform, highly influential podcasters and commentators like Candace Owens and Elijah Schaeffer and Iverson, I don't believe that they are actually anti-Semitic or nationalist or whatever. I don't think they believe anything they say about anything. I'm at the point now where I'm like, these guys are just grifting. They're on a payroll. Either they're on a payroll or
Yeah.
they're getting enough in money and clicks from being so outrageous and controversial that that's benefiting them in some way. But they don't have an allegiance to the truth. They don't have an allegiance to America. They have an allegiance to anything except
Right.
themselves. But the people who follow them, that's what they don't care that they are curating this audience. They are collecting and creating this audience of so-called woke right, whether you like that phrase or not, but these racial identitarians, it's like they don't even care. They're trying to destroy MAGA. Do you get this? Like they're
Yes.
trying to destroy the dissident right. Like they're trying to destroy all the momentum that we've built up. And
Oh, absolutely.
in the end, they're gonna benefit the woke left, because the woke left is like, look, this is what we were telling you guys all along, right? The woke left is like, look at these people. This is what they really think. In fact, Elijah Schaeffer has been tweeting stuff like, it's time to stop pretending. Now that he's like, it's time to stop pretending, MAGA. We know that America's for white people. I'm like, what? No. Why are you
Yeah.
saying crazy stuff like this?
Again, a good way to tell if someone's fraudulent and a good guy, right, is whether or not they're hypocritical. I think that's always a litmus test for if someone's good or bad, if they're telling the truth or not, if they're just trying to be self-serving or actually help other people. Are they hypocritical? If you look at these people, they are chocked full of hypocritical claims and who they partner with and things that they allegedly stand for and that don't stand for. They're constantly changing. Again, Candace, in that one tweet that you shared, hypocritical. She's not even standing on her own principles in one tweet alone. You see this again with Candace, for example. I saw this the other day where she was kind of shilling for Andrew Tate after Benny Johnson
Yes.
had him on. Didn't Candace just tell us, I don't know how many times prior to that, how the Jews are evil because they are the ones behind all the adult content and
Yes.
all this stuff. But then she's defending and shilling for Andrew Tate, who got rich and made millions off of making adult content and exploiting
Yes.
underage women. So
Completely
which is it,
hypocritical.
Candace? Which is it? Again, Candace is not an honest person. She's
Yeah.
a user, and she is a political opportunist who will say all the right things when it gets her the audience she wants, and then when that narrative dries up and people aren't interested in anymore, speaking of BLM, she moves to the next thing that'll get her clicks and attention. Same with Elijah Schaeffer. These people are users, and they are not serious people at the end of the day.
And I'm trying to find a positive, like a silver lining in this. And this is it for me, is whenever something like this happens, like I used to listen to Candace Owens and share her stuff, same with Elijah Schaeffer. And I even, like I said, went on his program. But when God reveals a truth to me and it's like, oh, you get to see more of a person and who they are, and they're saying something insane, or they're pushing people towards the Communist Party, or they're saying
Yeah.
stuff like we should all be racist, and like
Right.
you need to pick your race and identify with that and be collectivist like the woke. It's like, if they start saying stuff like that, thank you God for revealing that to me, so I know that about that person now. That's like the silver. It's like, thank you, because I was in the dark and I didn't know
Yes.
that, and now
It's
I'm not in the dark.
exactly. This is what I would tell everybody. Here's another tweet, by the way, that it points to the Candace hypocrisy that I just sent you.
Okay.
It if you're ever trying to be, I think just a good base principle for being discerning about anything, whether it's a religious movement or a political figure or an online influencer or anybody, is, are they being consistent to their own standards? If they're not being consistent to their own standards, they don't believe it, and they're just using whatever they're saying to be to be an opportunist, whether it's to make money or to get clicks or to drive influence of some kind or whatever, to get votes if you're a politician. You see this all the time. And so another good example, this is Joel Webin, where he went on his podcast to talk about how, women shouldn't have a podcast. And he criticized Allie Beth Stuckey for basically saying that, she should say nice and true things, but just to her kids in the home, because she's a
I
woman and
saw
that's where
that.
she belongs. I don't know if you guys remember that clip going around. But then, rewind a little bit, and he was on her show, and he not only was on her show, but he paid for an ad spot in a fake 10-minute interview on her show, to which she said was like not organic and she didn't want to do it. And basically she did it anyways, and that she's never going to do that again. And so he's a complete opportunist, not actually living by his own standards. And there's been many examples of this where he's had women on his show, like Megan Basham. He's gone on other women's shows like Pearly Things, and he's not even living by his own standards.
No,
and yet he's going to preach about this patriarchal women shouldn't be on podcasts and have a voice in public. It's nonsense. Unless it benefits him.
Unless it benefits him. At the very same time that he was saying stuff like Allie Beth Stuckey should say true things, but only in the context of her home to her children. Like basically he was saying she shouldn't be a podcaster because that's teaching.
It's the shut up and go in the kitchen kind of thing. Yeah.
At the same time he was saying that, in the same week, he was bragging about the fact that Candace Owens on her podcast shared a clip of him. And I was like, how can you hold these two things simultaneously where you're like, women shouldn't be podcasters? By the way, this woman podcaster platformed me. Like, it's just like,
I heard someone arguing that against him in some of the replies, and someone was like, well, or he said something like, believe it or not, my views change over time, insinuating that his position that he held prior when he went on Allie's podcast or when he had Megan Basham on or so on, which that was not even that long ago, that his views have since changed. But then to what you're saying, somebody commented and was like, you just praised like a day ago Candace Owens sharing your content. So your views have not changed. You're just an opportunist and a liar.
A total liar.
Yeah.
Yes. That's another person who I held in high esteem. And now I'm like, I thank you for opening my eyes. Like, thank you for helping me see a full picture of this person. I want to show you something. I don't know if you saw this. This one might be new for you. This is an example of how this movement, whatever you want to call it, white identitarianism or, woke right or whatever you want to call it. I don't care what you call it, but this growing, it's starting to gain influence, at least online, at least with these big influencers pushing it. This is an example of how they think. And I wanted to call attention to this one because it's so similar to woke. It is woke. Look at this. This guy, in my comments, I've had several of these people. I was talking about, well, how do you
it's the same thing.
It's the same thing. I was talking about alpha and I was like, well, if you mean, when you say like defining terms, right? What do you mean when you say it? Because when I say alpha, what I'm describing is a man who's strong in confidence and morals and virtues. And it sounds like you are just using the word alpha to mean like physical attributes, like physical strength. Okay. So I was trying to understand him better. And he says, women cannot define alpha, only men can. And
feminism in reverse.
It's feminism in reverse. Do you guys not remember, like, how many years now have the woke try to do these same identity group rules, these made up rules where they say men cannot have an opinion on abortion because they're men. Only women can have an opinion on abortion. Or they're like white people cannot define racism. White people don't get to have a say on what's racist and what's not because they're white people. Only black people, only people of color can have a say on what's racist or not. And this is the same thing from the so-called woke right. They're doing the same game, guys.
It's the same. It's just what's a good word for it? It's all about your lived experience. Lived experience is the arbiter of truth. That's what and that's just postmodern. These people are postmodernists. The truth is subjective to the individual or to the group. The group gets to define it. And it's malleable and it can change. Again, you see this with guys like Eric Kahn, who is the Christian pastor in Utah. Apparently a rigid biblicist who's reformed and all these things and is this biblical conservative Christian, but yet he'll say that Franco in Spain, the mid 20th century dictator, murdering socialists without due process or trial is okay simply because they were socialists. So morals to him are simply dependent on, is this person a part of a political affiliation that I agree with or don't agree with?
In group or out group?
Are they in the in or out group? This is postmodern subjective ethics. This is not Christian. It's not conservative. But these people call themselves Christians and conservatives. And they don't only call themselves Christians and conservatives. They act like they're the only true Christians and conservatives and everybody else is fake. when everything they're doing and saying is the opposite of what we actually stand for.
Yeah, I mean, he
It's
basically,
crazy.
it's like they're like, murder's cool, but only when we do it.
Only when we do
And
it.
against, yeah, and when
Yeah.
we choose who we do it to. I'm like, that's what the woke believe, that
Yes.
murder's cool, but only when they do it. And like, you don't have any
Tyranny is cool only when we're in control, and monarchism is cool, and neo-integralism is cool when we are the ones that are in power, and racism is actually a good thing when we're the ones doing it.
Yes. Yes, that's what they're basically like. All these tweets where they're like, you need to stand up for and support our community of white people. I'm like, you sound just like Black Lives Matter.
It's exactly the same. It is literally a mirror image of it. It's crazy to watch. And I remember seeing this stuff about a year ago pop up that's when I first started to kind of be like, what is this? What is going on? And back then it was, there was some key examples, but it wasn't nearly as explicit. Now it's just like everywhere, and they are completely come out of the closet. And I think that's what happens. I know with BLM, you kind of saw that, right? They tried to hide and pretend that they weren't Marxists until everybody found out that they were Marxists. And then it was just all out like riots and attacking people and chaos. And it was just, this is, I think, the stage that this is entering. I think they've been exposed. And thankfully, I think they've been exposed a lot quicker than the woke left was, because we already saw this playbook before, and we know what this leads to, and we know what this is. I think it's going to be soon down the pipes where you see a lot of these white identitarian woke right people, Christian nationalists, start marching in the streets for white rights.
They're going to be the
summer of love.
The exact stereotype of what the woke left says. It's like they work hand in hand. They benefit from each other. The woke left and the so-called woke right, whatever you want to call them, they need each other.
They give each other a villain to fight.
Yes, they need to be able to point to each other, but they believe all the same stuff, that like they're collectivists. We need to pick our racial identity and go side with our race, and then our race at the top, right? Like this. Yeah. So couple things in the chat. I got a few people to thank, and then I have some questions. Randy, hey Randy, what's up? I think I'm going to get to see you later today, Randy. For $10 says, I agree with Mick. This garbage is bought and paid for by China and the left in America. BLM was a scam, and so is this stuff. It is revolutionary talk meant to discredit the right and bring about communism. Trust no one.
I agree. I think the purpose of it is to vindicate the left's critique of the right in general. They want to make people believe that everything that the left has said about conservatives is true. Yes. So that we're Nazis and we're racists and we're white identitarians and we hate women and all the stuff that the left has been saying about us for decades. They want to make that a reality, and so that they have something to act, because in the past, over the last 8-10 years that I've really been paying attention, the left has accused conservatives of that, but they haven't really had concrete evidence besides some really crazy fringe people that, like a Nick Fuentes, for example. Now that is becoming more mainstreamed online, especially on Twitter for some reason. And now the left is like, see, this is what we've been talking about. See, this is who these people really are. And it's going to, I think the purpose is to infect the entire MAGA movement in general, when the large majority of us are not these people. It kind of like what I think that the radical left did with certain elements of the Democrat Party. I'm obviously not a Democrat or a left or a liberal on that side, but there's a lot of people that are Democrats that were never BLM Marxists, or that were never in support of the transgender crazy stuff or any of this.
But they slowly got pulled over there.
Yep. I think that's the same thing that's happening.
It's the same thing that's happening, and it's like like, as we said, it plays into each other. And you were just saying, the woke left gets to point and say, look, this is what we've been telling you. This is what they're always like. And people like Elijah Schaeffer are playing right into it. They're giving them he's saying stuff like, come on, MAGA, let's stop pretending, we can all say what we really think now, right, MAGA? Like America's for white people. I'm like, what are you talking about?
They're like, the left's going to call us racist. Screw it. We're going to actually be racist. Like, that's not what are we doing? We're just becoming the thing they want us to be. At that point. What does that solve? It solves nothing. It's
the Nietzsche quote about becoming the monster you fight. It's And I used to see that when I started waking up from the woke left spell and realized what I had been in and what they said they were versus what they really are. That quote really helped me a lot, that Nietzsche quote, be careful fighting monsters lest you become the monster you fight, because I felt like it described a lot of the if you think there are some well-meaning people in the woke left, and I do, I think there's people who've been bamboozled and brainwashed who are in there. And I've met lots of people in the chat used to be in the woke left and woke up to what it was. But it was like you were slowly like a lot of people in the woke left, for example, they really believe that they're fighting racism while they push racism.
Yes.
And that's insane. They're the monster that they fight. And that's what this look at the CCP stuff. It's like I really believe I'm fighting censorship by supporting the CCP.
Like the
What?
number one state sponsor of censorship. Yeah, we're going to partner
What?
with them to fight censorship. Okay. But yeah, they really are. They're becoming the very thing that they are saying they're against. That they're becoming the thing that they're saying they're the lone bulwark in effectively fighting. It's honestly sad. Like it's hard to know how to stop this stuff. I think the best thing we can really do is just to continually talk about it and point it out. It seems to be working to some degree because I think there's a lot more people that are noticing this, just noticing things, as they say. And so,
you know what the response is, Mick? And I want to hear from you what you get in your comments, because the more, like you said, the only thing I know to do about it is to talk about it and highlight it the same way I've been doing about woke for years. And the comments I get from people who don't like it that I'm talking about it are the same as the woke comments. So the woke critics would say stuff to me like, well, you're white. Okay. Like check your white privilege, and you're straight, check your straight privilege. Do you know what these people say to me? They say, well, you're a woman.
Yeah. Or they call me a Jew.
They call me a
they
Jew
call me
too.
a leftist, and I'm not either of those things. They'll just like put identity markers onto you that aren't even true.
Yes.
A lot of times, and then say, well, I'm not going to listen to you because you're this race,
yes,
allegedly, or because you have this political ideology that you don't actually have.
That happened today. This guy replied, and he just replied with some hook nose cartoonish picture of a Jewish person to me, and I was like, okay, like that's all they have is just the same as the woke is to say you are part of such and such identity, which hello, not Jewish, but if I were, still it would be, that's not an argument to say you're Jewish. But they're like, well, you're a Jew, or you're a woman, or and the woke did the same, like, well, you're white, and
like
you're straight.
Like I'm a Christian conservative Trump voter. I voted for him 3 times now. I'm of Romanian descent, American citizen, but apparently I'm an Israeli leftist shill. Apparently, according to my comment section, that's what I am allowed. Point is these people are not honest, and they're doing the same identity, the same identity struggle session that the woke left does. It's crazy. Again, a good example of that is what that lady said before, where I said this is like BLM for angry white people, is me disagreeing with white identitarian nationalism equals I'm a traitor to white people. I'm against my own kind. I'm against my own race, my own people. It's so ridiculous. And here's the beautiful thing about America is America is not, and I don't believe ever has been, a nation that has been predicated on racial purity. Like our identity has never been about race. Even in the early days, people always be like, well, we had slavery. Yeah, unfortunately we did. But less than 1% of people, I believe, even owned slaves. Most people were against it throughout American history. The narratives that you hear about, it sounds like everybody's for race. Everybody was a racist back then, and everybody had slave. Not true. Even before the Constitution was signed, all the colonies except one voted against slavery, even way back then. Most people were not for it. So to have this idea that we're all racist, or that our nation has always been about white people and preserving the white race, and it's just fundamentally inaccurate. It's a complete revision of history. Again, who else likes to revise history? It's the woke left.
Yes.
But you just see all these parallels. And
well, the great point, Mick, because the woke left sells that same narrative.
Yep.
They are also trying to say America's always been for white people.
It's the same. It's not, in that case, you're right. It's not even swapping the narrative. It's just verbatim the same narrative. It's crazy.
They're saying America's always been for white people and that's bad. And these guys are saying America's always been for white people and that's good. And you're like, hey, guess what? It wasn't just always created for white people.
Right. Black people have been here just as long. Native Americans, obviously. Hispanics, let's say a lot of places in the South, like Texas, Hispanics have been there longer than any white people. And so, and it's this idea that it's just about white people is absurd. It's just never been the case. It's always been a nation that's about a proposition and a constitution and equal rights under the law for everybody. And these people want to fundamentally strip that out of our political system. They don't want free rights and equal rights for everybody. They don't want liberty. They don't want individual autonomy. They don't want you to be able to speak freely. They don't want you to be able to worship freely. And so you'll often see with a lot of this stuff we're talking about, this parallel with attacking the Constitution itself, as if this is like a dead letter, like American Reformer, they call it a dead letter. It's ran its course and it's led us to communism, and we have to throw it out now and start over, have a new founding, they'll say. It's absurd.
That's what the woke left says too.
It's exactly the same thing.
The woke left says the Constitution's a dead document. We need to start over. Those founders didn't know anything. And that's what these woke right guys, and if you guys don't know this, this is what they're pushing online. They are saying that the Constitution needs to be thrown out. It's
yes,
like, look,
explicitly.
I am an American and a constitutionalist. I'm not part of any of these crazy, like, let's get rid of the Constitution. Let's all get with our racial identity tribe. And let's like, I
think that's fundamentally why they hate the civil rights movement, by the way, because the plea of the civil rights movement was a call back to honor the Constitution in the first place. It wasn't to throw out the Constitution. It was saying, hey, the Constitution promises, our founding documents, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal and that we're all to be equally upheld under the law fairly, and that we should all have the same rights, right? It's not, in other words, it never argued for racial identitarianism, quite the opposite. Yeah. And so the civil rights leaders, and there's a lot of problems I have with them. There's a lot of problems I have with Martin Luther King and other people, but there's a lot of good people as well. And you see this throughout the Civil War and the whole slavery issue too. People, a lot of the people that were really pushing against it were calling for the country to actually honor its founding principles,
Frederick
not
Douglass.
The other way around, not to throw them out.
Yes.
And so I think that's why these woke right, identitarian, neo-fascist, Christian nationalists, whatever you want to call them, why they fundamentally hate the Civil Rights Act, and they fundamentally hate this push towards equal rights under the law in general for anybody, whether it's women or Jews or Black people or Hispanics or whoever, because they hate that idea in the first place. They hate that idea. They hate the Constitution. It's crazy. Yeah. I just hope these people do not get any sort of legitimate institutional power if they don't already. At least in our own government.
Okay, so there's two ways this could go. Maybe there's probably three ways. There's two ways that I think are a problem. One way is that right now they don't have a lot of institutional power at all. They just have some very big, popular influencers in the alternative.
They have a lot of online, pseudo influence.
Right. Yeah. Online pseudo influence. But let me remind people, that's all the woke had for a long time. When I was in the woke world for 20 years, the majority of the time that I was in it, we had no influence other than loudmouths online. That was it. And then I had a lot, when I started waking up from it and leaving it, I had friends who were classical liberals is how I would describe them, who the ones who at least acknowledged it was a problem, like I was acknowledging, but they were saying, oh, well, it's never going to leave the colleges. It's just they don't hold any power. Don't worry. It's just this fringe movement. And then within a few years, it blew up and it's in every institution. It's controls the woke left, control the media, politics, entertainment, like everything. It's in the tech world. It was in, everybody's doing DEI policies. They're teaching it to kindergartners. You can change your sex. All the woke stuff just went everywhere. And so one way it could go is that all of a sudden it reaches some boiling point and it explodes into institutional power. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's one way it could go. But the more likely way it could go that's bad, I think, is that it is used as a cudgel by the woke left. So they say, look at this crazy woke right contingent. This is what all of the woke is like, or all of the right is like. This is what all of the right is like. This is what Trump voters are like. We need to stomp this out and
to justify legitimate persecution, or like in their mind, legitimate persecution.
Yes. That's what scares me. Is they're just being a puppet for the woke left.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what it is, because you're right, where the woke left, in some sense, well, I guess this last election kind of proved otherwise. the woke left having institutional power. I think they still do largely, but again, it's like a pendulum. It kind of seems to go back and forth. Because I think that if the woke left had the amount of institutional power that they supposedly do, I don't think that the election would have gone the way that it did.
That was so encouraging.
Right. And so, but again, this is where I think the woke left is really focusing in now, is trying to influence the right wing movement that does have institutional power and political authority at this point over them, I would argue. And they're trying to co-opt it and make it look terrible and drag us under, so that then they can, in 4 years from now, have a villain to point at. See, this is who they'll point at. Elijah Schaeffer, they'll point at Candace Owens, they'll point at Tucker Carlson, they'll point at anybody else who platformed legitimate fascists and white nationalists and all these crazy people and crazy ideas. I think it's gonna get really ugly if we don't stomp this out fast.
And like you said, it is encouraging that it seems like people are trying to put out this fire much faster than, the left didn't put it out at all. They didn't even try to. It just walked right in the doors of the liberal movement and turned it into this like communist, Marxist, like just changed it overnight. It wasn't overnight, but it seemed like it. It's like you said, most people who were in the Democratic Party weren't Marxists, and then they were.
Yeah.
And then they were.
Right.
Let me think a few more people before I get behind. Hey, Tracy's here. Gen X marks the spot. You guys go and check out Tracy's channel. I got to come back on your channel soon, girl. She says, I tapped out on Candace Owens when she spewed anti-Semitism a while back. Yep, me too. Does she know that the CCP stance on, darker skinned people? Does she know what they want to do to the Uyghurs?
She probably does. And money is good.
Money talks.
Yeah.
She knows that Elijah Schaeffer apparently says he believes that America's not for her.
Yep. But she'll defend him and he'll defend her. And even though they allegedly are race identitarians, or he is, she'll shill for the white identitarians who, if they had their way, she would be kicked out of the country, that's the irony of it.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Also from Tracy. Thank you, Tracy, for $5. She says, also, there isn't a white culture more than other race. We are broken into our cultural, Italian, Jewish, Russian, British, or even Southern, cultures.
Yeah, right. Like, what does that mean when they say I'm pro-white, or what about like the white culture, what does that mean? There's 100 different strands, you could say, of white culture. Look at Europe. There's tons of different countries there, and they're all very diverse culturally, but yet they're all white. Right.
Well,
even in the United States,
what they're doing, Mick, I would say, is they are buying into the woke left's definition and the way that they look at the world, because the woke left has reduced all of these different groups into whiteness and white culture. They have tried to paint, they're all white people,
all the same.
And they do the same with the phrase people of color. They're all the same, except when we don't like the Asians, and then we say they're white adjacent.
Yeah. It's crazy. But even that, like, so I live in Wisconsin here. The culture here is very German. It's very, I would say German over. Wisconsin's if any of you guys have been to Wisconsin, it's a very German infused culture. Like even the way the architecture is in a lot of small towns here, you feel like you're in Germany kind of. It's very, the food and all that, very, very different. Then it's almost like, have you been to, you live down in Austin, like Fredericksburg, I think, or not?
All the time, every week I work down there.
There's some other town that I'm thinking that's like very
Wahlberg is very close to me. That's German.
Yeah, it's more like that, kind of everywhere here. And but it's, again, that's very different than if you were to go to Louisiana, or if you were to go over to California, or if you were to go to New York City, or even Chicago down the road here. Like it's very, very different, even just around the country. And so there's not just this like hegemonic white culture that exists. That's a completely fabricated thing.
Yeah.
But then they base their whole political ideology and philosophy off of what we should do in response to that, a response to that.
There are cultural things that I am definitely like that are home for me, that are the culture I come from.
Yeah.
I guess the one I come from would most accurately be called like cracker culture. That's what Thomas Sowell calls it, like the white redneck, like very Southern. But that's what, it's a certain kind of food. certain kind of music, all of that stuff. And then
Right.
it's like, if I could go to the Midwest and I'm like, you guys eat a lot of like tuna noodle casserole and stuff, which I've grown to love, but that's like not the kind of casserole we have.
Wisconsin's a lot of beer and cheese and burgers and brats and stuff like that. So it's pretty funny. But yeah, it's very different. Again, there's not just this hegemonic cultural consistency across the board, even in our own country. It's very diverse. And that's the beautiful thing about America, is it can be very culturally diverse, but we all are Americans and have this central identity underneath our founding principles and documents, and more particularly our Bill of Rights, that apply to everybody. It doesn't matter what skin color you are, or what gender you are, or where you live in the country. Unless you live in California, then you don't really have any rights. But like, you know what I mean, though? That's at least, how it's supposed to operate. And I think again, that's why you see a lot of them specifically attack the 14th Amendment, which is kind of more or less the amendment, in my understanding, that made the states at that time actually have to live by and adhere to the Constitution. Because before that, they didn't actually have to entirely. So you still saw blasphemy laws, and you saw segregation laws and weird things like that going on in certain parts of the country. And is including slavery, right? And after the 14th Amendment was passed, and it basically forced the states to apply the Bill of Rights to their legal system. And you see a lot of them, as a result, attacking the 14th Amendment as if it's this bad thing that kind of was the first domino to fall that led to the rise of communism in this country. It's just not true. Communism is the removal of individual rights for the priority of the group. So the 14th Amendment did the opposite of that. It's I don't know. That's my take, but it's probably controversial, but that's okay.
No, I agree with you. That's a great way of phrasing it. The removal of individual rights to the collective, in favor of the collective, the racial identity groups or whatever.
Right.
CJ, I want to thank you, CJ, for the super chat for $10. He says, I find that people who proclaim their supposed Christianity and virtue the loudest always seem to be overcompensating. Their actions don't reflect their self-grandiose proclamations.
It's often hypocritical. Yeah.
Yes.
What we're talking about.
It's kind of like, again, you should be able to, like, don't be afraid of talking about your faith and talking about God. Of course, I had to get over that period of fear of talking about even being a Christian. I was like embarrassed to tell people at first.
Yeah.
And I had to get over that. It's like, I shouldn't be afraid of saying I worship like the Alpha and the Omega. But at the same time, it's sort of like, I don't have to put it on a lawn sign. Like it's like, you should be able to tell from my behavior and the kind of things I care about and talk about. Like you don't have to be constantly telling people like in every tweet, this is as a Christian or whatever. You don't have to be. And some of these guys like Benny Johnson, after he platformed and praised and promoted the predator and pimp Andrew Tate, every day, I don't know if you noticed, but he started tweeting Christ is King. And I was like, dude, like,
these vague Christian slogans. They want to put it in there. Like he said, I think he has in his bio something like, I'm here to save Western civilization or something like that. And he's constantly, posturing these Christian virtues, and he's posting Bible verses, just posting Bible, which I think it's great to share scripture on. But the reason why these people are doing it isn't to isn't to instruct people theologically. Quite the opposite. It's to virtue signal to himself so that he has credentials politically with a certain tribe. And meanwhile, these people don't actually live by what they say, which was the whole controversy with him platforming Andrew Tate and drooling over him for like however long that podcast was, along with the Trump lawyer, what's her name?
Oh my God,
Alina Habba or something.
Yeah.
And it's just, these people are fake. They're not real Christians, in my opinion. A real Christian would not do that. I think that's pretty obvious. And it's kind of a litmus test. If you're going to post Bible verses and say, good morning, Christ is King every day, but then drool over a Muslim narcissistic pimp like Andrew Tate, you're a fake.
Let me show you along these lines. He shared this today, Benny Johnson, and I just thought this is somebody called it Darvo, deny and reverse victim offender, and I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
He does those red lights all the time, so it's important. He did a little red light, and
usually it's not, is what that means.
And he said, public service announcement. Now listen to this. This is like truth peppered with a lie. He's like, since our victory in November, there's been a raging effort from bad faith actors to tear the America First movement apart. Yes, Benny, there has been an effort by influential people with lots of, viewers like yourself. And then he goes,
China and Candace Owens.
China, Candace. And then he goes, the attacks have been relentless, some in public, lots behind the scenes. Dark spiritual energy. I agree. There's a lot of dark spiritual energy going on after we won.
Right.
He says the enemy would love nothing more
I
than
can't
for
wait
Trump.
for the switch. This is the bait. Can't wait for the switch.
Yeah. The enemy would love nothing more than for Trump to enter office with his base atomized. Yes, I agree. They want us fractured and bitter, ripping each other's over nonsense. Now here's the switch over nonsense. A house divided against itself. Be exceedingly cautious of those sowing division right now. Instead, check out what Trump is doing. Yes, I agree. You should check out what he's doing, which is great stuff. Blessed are the peacemakers, he says.
And he's probably assuming he is one of them.
Yes,
he's sowing division,
even
by
though he's
platforming a pimp and a Muslim psychopath.
He's sowing division. He goes, remember, save your energy for the real fight. Let me ask you a question. Is it divisive, Benny? Is it sowing division to try and praise and prop up and sell to MAGA a Muslim pimp and predator who's made his name and a bunch of money off of pimping out women, producing pornography, ripping off men, shaking down men? Is that and doing it on a so-called
and bragging about
channel,
all of it
Right.
repeatedly?
Is that divisive? Is it divisive to try purposefully for some reason, try and publicly on a big platform associate this pimp and this predator with Trump?
Yeah.
Is that divisive? Is that going to atomize his base, do you think? Like, why stop doing that?
It's so paradoxical, right? Because the people that are crying about this and people talking, you'll see Tim Pool do this as well. I've noticed everybody's claiming that people are woke, right? They're the real woke, right? And they're being divisive. And I'm like, the people that I see, whether it's like people like you or Michael O'Fallon, James Lindsay, Seth Dillon, Joel Berry, whoever else, a lot of accounts, there's so many accounts, Will Spencer, different people like that are calling out the woke right on a repetitive basis on foundational principles, a lot of them Christian principles, a lot of them constitutional principles, are not the ones being hypocritical or sowing division. They're pointing out the people sowing division and being hypocritical. I think another example, again, with the whole Andrew Tate thing, is the amount of Christian nationalist white identitarians who've been crying about Muslims coming into the country, which I agree to some extent. We should not just be letting anyone into the country.
I agree.
I'm not in favor of mass migration. I think we talked about that a little bit last time.
I agree.
I imagine. And so, like, I have a very Trumpian conservative position on immigration, I would say. And, but it's funny. They don't want Muslims coming in explicitly, anyone that's Muslim, according to them, but they'll platform Andrew Tate all day long and then make excuses about why he's someone that we should listen to. It like, there's no consistency in value. There's no consistency. There's no true weight and measure of what they're actually doing by their own standards.
Andrew Tate is running this joke PR thing where he's supposedly running for prime minister, and he's been tweeting all last year that Britain needs Islam, that Christianity is not enough, that it needs to become a Muslim state. Britain, looking forward to the future of Islamic
Johnson.
Britain.
Look at Benny Johnson. Look at what Islam's doing to Germany and Britain. It's terrible. We cannot let that over here. And in today's guest, Muslim Andrew Tate. Like, what are we doing? It's
Candace Owens. Pornography is run by the Jews and it's awful, and you shouldn't, because the Jews and porn. Let's bring on this pornographer. It's like talking about how all women are prostitutes. Do you know what Andrew Tate said this week after all this happened? He said all women, including Candace Owens, are prostitutes. He says he says the married ones who are monogamous and only ever had one partner, they're just a prostitute who only has one client.
Yes. Yeah. It's just like, good grief, guys. It's just so obvious. These people are frauds. It really just comes down to that. Totally. These people are complete frauds.
Totally. And let me make a plea to people. I know it hurts when you learn something about a person that changes your opinion of them. I know it hurts. And I know people like to cling to their faves, right? And I think of it, it's almost like an like an artist that you like maybe puts out an album that's just phenomenal, and then they follow it up with something that's just terrible, and you're like, no, how could this happen? Look at this this is just gonna happen. There's nobody you should have absolute complete faith in other than your Lord and Savior. Like
don't idolize people. It's so stupid. Don't idolize either of us. I'm not perfect. I'm gonna get probably a lot of stuff wrong, and so it's so again I think that's really a big problem. You see this in the Christian world as well, where you have these celebrity pastors, Stephen Furtick, Carl Lentz, Rick Warren, even guys like John Piper or Tim Keller or Doug Wilson. And a lot of what these guys say is fine and good and whatever, and you can agree with it, and maybe not Stephen Furtick or Carl Lentz, but but a lot of these other, like a John Piper, he says a lot of good true biblical stuff. A Tim Keller does, Doug Wilson does at times, and things like that. But we should never idolize these people. Like Doug Wilson's going to get things wrong. It certainly has. John Piper's going to get things wrong. Certainly has. Tim Keller certainly gets things wrong. As well. And you should be free to disagree with them. And that shouldn't completely shake your ideology or your theology based off of whether or not you agree or disagree with somebody that's prominent, or that's a celebrity in your mind, or has a lot of social influence in that way, or that's an author, or that's like got some big credential. Who cares? It doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How do you differentiate between, like, I think you have to make room for people who you respect to have different opinions than you on some things, or to get some things wrong, right? How do you differentiate those people who you think are good people, or you respect a lot of what they say, and then you're like, wait a minute, they got this thing totally wrong? How do you differentiate those from the absolute con artists and grifters who suddenly you realize, oh my gosh, they're selling a completely different belief system?
That's a fantastic question. I think it's just consistency over time, and kind of what I was saying before about hypocrisy, measuring and weighing what they say. Are they being consistent with their own standards? Are they being hypocritical? Are they trying to sell you on something? I'll give you a good example of this, of someone that I don't think is a wolf, or someone that I don't think is a sellout, someone that I think is generally a good person, but that's been kind of criticized as such by a lot of the woke right Christian nationalist crowd, due to Megan Basham's book, Shepherds for Sale. That's Gavin Ortland. So
I don't know him.
He's a theologian. He's a Christian apologist. He predominantly just talks about like kind of niche Christian theology issues. His channel is really good overall. Argues from a theologically mostly Reformed, I would say, Protestant perspective. There's been some things with his like dad, for example, Ray Ortland, where he tweeted something about voting for Kamala Harris. I was voting for Kamala Harris, and a lot of people attach Gavin with that, and they're like, "See, this is." But it's, again, you have to separate one person from another. I think you have to be consistent that way. Just because Gavin's dad or someone that he knows says something doesn't mean that he believes that. You know what I mean? Which I think is obvious for most well-adjusted normal people. But I'll give you an example. Megan Basham claimed in her book Shepherds for Sale, this is the first chapter, and Gavin, I almost said Gavin Newsom, Gavin Ortland was kind of the prime example of this, of someone who's sold out and is a shepherd for sale, essentially, because they said some things about climate change that the right-wing tribalists over here on Megan's side largely disagree with, and then accused Gavin of saying that he's saying that if people don't agree with him, then they're not being consistent with the gospel, which is not at all what Gavin said. If you go watch Gavin's video, he actually makes the opposite point, that this isn't something that should be of gospel priority, that this should be something that we should be able to discuss freely with each other, not attack each other over, as if this is a matter of theological importance necessarily. And Gavin, if you go watch his video, he made that point over and over again. And I'm saying that as someone who disagrees with Gavin's perspective on climate change, but he's not making it an issue of gospel importance. The woke right Christian nationalists are doing that and saying, if you don't agree with them, then you're kind of selling out, and you're a part of the leftist agenda, and you must be getting paid by George Soros. If you don't agree with
them on climate change.
Yeah. And so I don't know if you guys want to go. Gavin made a video about this. Maybe I'll post it on my Twitter so you guys can go look at what I'm talking about.
Please do.
But point is Gavin would be an example of somebody who I don't believe is a sellout, who I believe is theologically and biblically consistent over time. He's not a hypocrite. He just is saying what he thinks is true. And even he pretty much never talks about politics. He just talks about niche theological things, church history, textual criticism, reformed perspectives on theology and that sort of thing. It's all good. I enjoy a lot of his content that way. And so he did one video that was vaguely political, the climate change thing. And now he's the prime example in Megan's book of someone who's a shepherd for sale and he's being paid off by billionaire leftist Democrats, which does that happen? Yes. Are there legitimately people that fit that category in the big Eva space? Absolutely. But Gavin's not one of them. And so that would be someone that I would put in that category of consistent over time, might not agree with him on that issue particularly, but he's not a bad person. He
but
seems
they're
to be
trying
true
to
to the
be
Bible.
right. You're going to have, thank you for answering that. Cause I think a lot of people have questions about that and they go to one of the extreme or the other. Either they completely like will write people off. Like a lot of people wrote Jordan Peterson off for getting the Kavanaugh thing completely wrong. And I was like, well, yeah, I think he got the Kavanaugh thing completely wrong, but he's consistent over time, his principles. That's a great way of putting it. And so I'm not throwing him out with the bathwater. He's not pushing communism on me. He's not like, he got that wrong.
You just might be
in my
wrong. It
opinion.
doesn't mean you're purposely misleading people. Those are two very different things.
Two very different things.
I could give an example of someone that I believe is purposely misleading someone. That would be someone like Russell Moore, the editor-in-chief of Christianity Today. I think that Megan's critique in her book about Russell is largely correct. And so these are two different examples of someone who, might not agree with on this particular issue, but he's just saying what he believes based off what he's read or seen. And he's not trying to be malicious or mislead you. He's actually explicitly said the opposite in the video. And he even says, like, you're free to disagree with me. I'd love to hear your contradictory thoughts in the comments. Maybe I'm missing something. He literally says that in the video, Gavin Ortlund. Meanwhile, Russell Moore, he has a track record of being a left-wing Democrat political activist. He has a long track record of explicitly doing that, where Gavin doesn't. And these are just, it's just
being discerning
and measuring over the consistency of their work and checking to whether or not they're being hypocritical or not. I think these are the primary ways in which we can discern that. And it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of digging and things like that. And it's definitely not for the faint of heart, I would say. But even someone, I'll give you another example. Someone like John Piper. People have called him a sellout in some regards, politically speaking. And I don't agree with him on a number of political issues, but do I think he's a sellout? Do I think that his ministry is just to be thrown to the wind? Do I think that he's a deceiver and he's paid off and he's a liar and these things? No. The consistency of his ministry and his character as a result has proven him to be otherwise. It's proven him to be a man of God, a leader in his home, a leader in his church, theologically and biblically consistent as much as he can, and not someone who's just willing to sell out. So just because he gets a couple political issues wrong that you don't agree with, even if he gets them majorly wrong in certain ways, it doesn't equate to that person's a sellout. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
There's a huge difference.
It's a huge difference. And a lot of times when, like with Candace Owens, for example, when she first started saying stuff that I thought was crazy, there was a long period of grace and just evaluating quietly where I was like, okay, maybe she's just getting this one thing wrong. Like I think it was when she said that dinosaurs weren't real. Or maybe it was when she said the flat earth stuff. I don't know. But there were a couple of times where I was like,
she said dinosaurs aren't real?
Yes.
Oh, goodness.
Said that, but that the bones were put here to trick us. But
of course,
I after the anti-Semitic stuff started, I was like, well, maybe she doesn't realize she's courting these grapers in her audience. And still, I was like, I'm just going to be kind of quiet and just watch and see what happens. And then it was more overtly anti-Semitic. And then now it's this communist CCP stuff. And so I reach a point where I'm like, I don't know what you're selling, but the way in which you use the phrase Christ is King to try and subvert Christ and no. And the way in which it's almost like at a certain point I had to just admit,
I'm still laughing at the dinosaurs aren't real. That's ridiculous.
But at a certain point I had to be like, wow, I don't think she believes anything. She'll just say anything
that'll get clicks and people be like, what? Because they assume like she's dug into it, because she always presents herself as someone that digs into things. It really does the research. And if they hear Candace Owens saying dinosaurs aren't real, people are going to be like, wait, maybe they're not real. Like, it's so stupid.
Yes, it's like at a certain point, I would say just be watchful, be discerning, be slow to speak, be slow to anger. All of this that the Bible
What did
tells us to
Jeff
be.
Goldblum ever do to
Yeah.
Candace is what I want to know.
It takes a while. It takes a while to be like, you know what? This person is thoroughly. It's not just that they are wrong on a couple of things, but they're sincere. It's this person's not sincere.
I
This
think
person
everybody should go start spamming Candace Owens
dinosaur.
comments with the famous Jurassic Park quote, "Life finds a way." And just start doing that and see.
Oh man. Okay, but
It's so funny. The Bible talks. I'm sorry. I'm like
no,
hung up on this
you're
now.
still
The Bible talks about dinosaurs. It talks. So
What?
is she saying it talks about like the Leviathan, and there's certain things in Job, for example, and there's other references elsewhere of these big creatures, like these sea
I didn't
creatures and
know
these
that.
dinosaur. And so is she saying that that's not real?
I mean, I can go and find the video clip. Hold on. Well, let me
Like,
thank a
what
couple
exactly
people
is she saying
first.
isn't real?
It's like it's a conspiracy. The dinosaurs are
Let me
yeah.
guess. The Jews put the bones there to lead us down some pointless witch hunt for dinosaurs.
It's the Jews. It's always the Jews.
Uh,
Okay, Randy. Thank you, Randy, for the $5 super chat. Randy Wallen says there is no woke right, just folks that identified and were grouped into the right that are now showing their true colors. They're communist infiltrators. This
that's
is a
actually a
great
good point.
it's a great point, and no matter how you look at it, like this is a great way of looking at it, I think. James Lindsay had a tweet the other day that I thought was spot on. He was like, if somebody had showed you some of these so-called woke right posts back just 2 or 3 years ago, had showed you Elijah Schaeffer saying stuff like America's for white people only, like you would have been like, that's a Fed post. Like this is crazy. This is somebody
Right.
trying to infiltrate and pretend to be on the right. And you would have noticed it back then.
You
And
would have
now,
seen people posting those memes of like all the feds at the Capitol building with their
yes,
blue shirts on, and all the dudes that like have their slick back hair and their earpieces in, pretending to be conservatives. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
But now it's like we've become, this is how propaganda works is we've been hit with so much of it on, if you spend a lot of time on X, like I have, we've been hit with so much of it that it slowly starts to change. Even with me, it's slowly started to change the way I think about certain things until it doesn't seem as crazy. You're like, well, let me think. Maybe she's
Right.
just misguided on the dinosaurs, like, and you're so,
Right.
but he's right. A few years ago, you would have rightly said, this is crazy. That's not a real conservative saying
Yep.
that.
Yep.
I appreciate it, Randy. Gen X marks the spot. Tracy for $5. Thank you. Tracy says the only reason blacks aren't is that the tribal or national origins were lost due to how they were brought here. Oh, she's talking about how there's all these different cultures like German
Oh,
and
yeah.
French,
Yeah.
and, etc. I would argue also that the way in which Tracy, the woke sometimes talk about the white people, it's not entirely like there's some truth to it in some place. Like a lot of people have lost their ethnic heritage. Like a lot of people don't know. My family, for example, I was told we're Irish and English, but I would say the culture I most identify with is not Irish or English, but redneck. So it's like,
Right.
and that's a bunch of different. That's Irish and English, like
I
all
don't
mixed
right. I
together.
don't think culture is necessarily something that has to do with your race at the end of the day. Like a black guy that lives down the street from me has more culturally, is more culturally similar to me than a
And
black
me,
guy than another black guy in you know, I don't know, somewhere in Africa, in Ethiopia or something like that, right? And
Mhm.
so culture is, I think, more predicated on who you live around and
Yes,
what your national uh, ethos is, I guess you could say. And here in the United States, again, right, like that black guy would have more culture in common with you, a southern redneck, quote unquote, than another black guy in Jamaica. So
yes.
it has nothing to do with race, I don't believe, at the end of the day.
No, I agree. That's why a lot of Southern culture where I'm from in South Carolina, like a lot of the food, um, just different cultural things that oftentimes the woke, like, and the woke in particular, like to call these black things, like, oh, well, that's, you know, um, like the way like a macaroni and cheese casserole, or different kinds of like collard greens, things like that. Oh, that's black food. No, that's Southern food. But yeah, it is black food, but it's also Southern white people food.
Right.
It's a cultural thing from this region.
Even when you travel abroad, I personally haven't. I haven't been to Europe or anything like that. I lived in Hawaii for a while, so I've kind of experienced this a little bit in Hawaii. But I remember even in Hawaii, when I was a kid growing up, meeting people that were from Wisconsin or that were from the Midwest. And regardless of if we shared the same race or ethnic heritage, even if it was a black guy or a Hispanic guy or something like that, there was kind of that like cultural, like, yeah, we understand each other, right? Like we come from the same place.
Yes.
And more has to do with the place that you're from than the race. So I think anyone that's an American, I would imagine, and I've had a lot of people tell me this, family and stuff like that, that's traveled overseas, taking trips to Europe or wherever, would be probably able to tell you, like, you see another American, even if you're a white guy and you see another American that's a black guy, you automatically have that connection with them. It has nothing to do with your race. It has to do with the nation that you're from, the country that you're from. You know what I mean? I don't know.
I do. My husband and I were just in Germany and Switzerland at the end of the year. And you're making me think of this moment where, because when we ran across Americans, it's this like, they could tell because we wore cowboy hats everywhere and like a Bucky's t-shirt.
That's a good giveaway.
They also like immediately, they didn't even say American. They're like, "Are you from Texas?"
Yeah.
But there was this couple talking behind us in Germany. We were at one of the cathedrals, and I mistook them at first for Americans, and I was like, "Hey, are you guys from America?" And they were like, "No, we're from Canada," and they just walked away. Like they did. They were
that's so uncomfortable. Yeah, like kind of the same. Come on, guys, we're kind of the same.
I know, but it felt like this chasm of like, okay, we have nothing to talk about, I guess, because you're Canadian.
Yeah.
So I walked away.
Right.
That's
hilarious.
Gen X marks the spot. Thank you, Tracy, for $5. Says, just like there's no Asian culture, it's Japanese, Chinese, Korean. For Americans, it should just be American culture.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think, again, people I think that are saying a lot of the rhetoric that the woke right is saying are probably people that haven't really been anywhere.
Yes.
And they probably haven't gotten out of their basements. I say that ironically as I'm sitting in my basement here. But they probably haven't traveled anywhere. They probably haven't traveled around the country much, I would assume. Like, I would challenge any of these people to go take a trip to Europe. Go take a trip to Hawaii. Hawaii is very culturally, racially diverse, and yet there's still that common bond of everyone's an American. We all still have that same ethos that we have here, and you'll find that all over the country, right? So it's not about racial culture and this or that. I fundamentally don't believe that. I fundamentally don't believe that that's what America is about in the first place, or that it ever has been about that. And so these people wanting to make it about that now and to claim that it's always been about that. You guys know that, right? It's always been about that. I think that they are fundamentally lying, just like the woke left, about history and about what this country is. And they're wanting to remake the country in their image.
Yes.
And then convince you that it's been like this the whole time. And you're just under this mass psychosis and delusion. This post-war consensus delusion, as they say. It's just, they're the ones that, frankly, that are under the delusion.
Yeah. The woke want to remake the country too.
Yep.
Randy Wallen for $2. Thank you. Randy says they're not crazy. They are evil. He's talking about the influencers pushing this stuff.
Oh, totally.
CJ for $5. Thank you. CJ says a big part of why Trump won the popular votes because the gains that he made with people of color. We should not undo that work. And more than just for like a voting coalition, but we should not undo that work because it's wrong. It's just like wrong. It's just
morally wrong to start dividing people and judging people's character or value in society
by
based
race,
off what skin color they have. It's just so fundamentally evil.
Yeah.
It shouldn't even. I feel stupid even having to say that. Like, we all know this. I think we should all know this intrinsically, especially for Christians. But I digress, because there's a lot of people that are out here that don't seem to understand this.
Yeah. Barton Bella, I just wanted to say thank you for the $5 super sticker. I'm so sorry I can't see what it is here on the StreamYard, but I hope it was a heart. Alex Lindstrom for $4.99 says, I think pro-white should just mean the same as pro any other skin color, but I know for some reason it means white supremacy. Let me see if I understand this right. Oh, we'll see. But see, okay, if I'm understanding this correctly, and you tell me what you think, Mick. I also, Alex, I think pro-black is also bad. Can't stand this stuff that's like, all the corporations for a while were doing all this woke stuff where they're like, support pro-black, business support all business owners. We saw this.
Yeah.
We passed this thing in Austin, my husband and I, and it was this building, and it's like, it's some building uh, for some organization for Latino and women, or people of color and women who are developers or who build houses, and it's like, I don't, honestly, when I'm picking a contractor, I'm not like, let me go find the woman who does this, or I need to find the black person who does it. No, it's just as bad. So
Yeah.
am I
It's like
reading this right?
I think of the fire department in LA right now who's been hyper fixated on identity markers and making sure there's this diverse intersectionality. And they even put this video out. I thought the video was parody at first, but I guess it's not. Of some fire chief and like some lesbian black fire chief lady or transgender or whatever saying, do you want someone to show up to your emergency that looks like you? Like, no, I just want someone who's going to be able to help me to not be on fire anymore. That's really all
Yeah.
I would care about at that point. And like,
Yes.
but it's I think what he's saying here is it's not wrong to, like, just like it's, I don't think it's wrong to, you shouldn't hate your own race. And I even think
Right.
the term race is kind of misleading. I don't think there's all these multiple. I think there's one race, the human race, and there's different uh, family lines, you could say, within that. I mean, it talks about this in scripture that everybody comes from Adam, and then from one. It says this in Acts 17:26, I think it is. I was just reading this earlier, where everyone came from one man, and therefore God made the nations out of one man, essentially. And so to think about it like you're pro, and I'm trying to understand this as well. Think about it like you're pro a specific race. I just don't think that matters. And I think the more Christian you become, the less that kind of thing should matter to you. It's
It
like a
doesn't.
very worldly way to think about things, I think.
I think it's a
Um,
very woke way to look at it, whether it's
and
on the left or the white,
and
the
the
right.
and I
I
think the
mean,
reason he says, but I know for some reason it means white supremacy. That's because the people using this phrase do mean white supremacy. They're explicitly saying that, whether it's the Smashing Bales account or Elijah Schaeffer or Joel Webin or many of these other people that have espoused this kind of rhetoric, they're explicitly telling you America's only for white people. Christianity apparently is most perfectly demonstrated in white Anglo-Saxon Protestant culture. It's just nonsense. It's this superiority mentality. And so these are a lot of the people that are running around putting pro-white in their bio. They're not just simply saying, I don't hate white people. Cool. I don't hate white people either, right? I don't hate black people. I don't hate white people. I don't hate Hispanics. But to say you're pro-white, I think, at least in this political context, is to explicitly say, again, how the people that are using the
it's
term most are using it,
Black Lives
to
Matter.
say you're a white supremacist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same with
It's
Black Lives Matter, how they use the term.
same with Black Lives Matter.
Yep.
It's why are you singling out of course they matter. Why are you singling out? Because it wasn't ever about that.
Right. Right.
I just, since you mentioned it, and I haven't shown this yet, this is
Oh,
the
here it
woke.
is. Yeah.
This is the LA Fire Department, and this is a
This is
very.
real, by the way.
This is real.
This is real. This is crazy.
Now, a lot of people were saying, "Hey, has the fire department in LA reduced its standards?" And because it used to be that the requirements, and I know this because I had a friend when I lived in LA. She was fit. She was in my gun club.
Yeah.
She was a little woman about my height, like in 5'3" or 5'4", but she was really strong, and she was having trouble at that time. This was years ago. Passing. She was trying to become a firefighter, but they had all these requirements. Like some of the training, she was having to run up and down flights of stairs with all these heavy equipment, like with the hoses and stuff, and she was having trouble passing. And those rules are there for a reason, because your job is to pull people out, to be able to run up those stairs with these heavy hoses and stuff, and also to be able to pull very large people out of fires. But I think they've probably, pushing their DEI stuff, they've relaxed those standards over the years. And so some people have been criticizing them and saying, hey, you got a lot of like fat and obese people who are now firefighters. You got a lot of emphasis on making sure you hire the right, quota of race and gender and all this stuff. And so this is what they put out, and this is real. I just want you to see, this is the end result of, like, you got to pick people for what race they're in or what sex they are.
Oh, I can't hear it. Is the volume on?
Did you say you can't hear it?
Yeah.
Oh, I think
you got to share audio? Did you hit share audio?
I did, but this has been happening to me lately where there's a problem. Let me try refreshing this. We'll try it one more time. If it doesn't work, we'll just move on.
A little volume thing there with the X on the video. Maybe that's it.
Can you hear this?
No.
Okay. We'll have to show this another time, guys. I do want you
to see funny. This. Maybe, yeah, it's hilarious. Just Google, I guess, 9/11 LA fire department video.
She says whether it's a medical call or a fire call, you want to see somebody there that looks like you. And then she says, and sometimes I hear people say, oh, is she strong enough to pull my husband out of a burning fire? And she says, and I usually respond to them, well, your husband got himself in the wrong place, got himself in a burning fire. Like, it's his fault he's in a fire.
That's why we called you. Correct.
She says maybe your husband shouldn't have gotten himself into a burning fire.
Victim blaming LAPD, LA Fire Department's victim blaming over here.
Yes.
That's hilarious.
It's so crazy. Justin Akinsola for $9.99. Thank you, Justin. Says, as much as I can't stand the right, the Chinese are not as left as people think. They're anti-gay, anti-Muslim, and now made Tibet theirs. Okay, no, I have to push back on this, Justin. Left, as I'm defining, this is why defining terms is important. It's not simply where you stand on these cultural issues. Woke as a framework, if you want to think of the way people are using it when they refer to woke right now, it's a way of, fundamentally a different way of looking at the world and looking at people, and saying that individual rights don't matter as much as the collective rights of different identity groups. And we have to prioritize different identity groups and give different identity groups power. And we have to put other groups down here and some groups up here, right? Like, it's all about, like, we have to redistribute power, and therefore we've got to treat people differently based on which of these identity groups they're in and stuff like that. Yep. And so if somebody is saying to you, that sucks, but it's just because of where they put the ranking of my identity groups, I like that framework, but I want to put my identity group over here at the top. Like, it's fundamentally the same framework, though. They're just shuffling the chairs on the deck of the Titanic.
Yeah, there's like that. I don't know if you've ever heard of like the horseshoe model.
Yes.
So it's basically the idea. It's talking about power dynamics as far as talking about right and left. So the identitarian, white identitarian, Christian nationalist, woke right people that we're talking about here in this video predominantly, they would have the same, very similar, at least from what I can tell, idea of political power dynamics in society, social power dynamics, as the woke left would. So they would, in a right-left paradigm, speaking about how you view power, they would be very far to the left. They're authoritarians. Yes. They're tyrants. They want to remove individual rights, focus on the group, not have equal weights and measures for the law, depending on what group you're a part of. That's a very left-wing idea of power. It's a top-down, tyrannical, controlled system. The right-wing view of power is more, is I think a better way to define it is more classically liberal. So it's about the individual rights, which is what our Constitution is. Our Constitution is a very much classically liberal document that does not prioritize the group over the individual, quite the other way around. In fact, the whole purpose of government, and I believe this is how God instituted it as well, is to serve the individual, right? It's to serve, it's to punish the innocent punish the guilty and reward the innocent. It is to be of service to the individual, and to allow the individual to do what's right, to enable the individual, to help the individual to do what's right. And that's a very right-wing perspective, you could say, as far as the power dynamics of government. I think that's biblical. These people are claiming to be Christians and claiming to be conservatives and claiming to be right-wing, but they have an identical view of power as the left. So they're really not right-wing. They're fakes, kind of like what that one comment said before. It's just fundamentally not the same thing. So I think the whole right-left paradigm, as far as thinking about it in terms of Republican or Democrat or certain social issues, which ones you are for and are not, I don't think that's an accurate way to think about it.
I completely agree. It's you phrased it much better than I did, so I'm going to leave it at that. But it's just like if you've got the same framework and you're just shifting around different parts of it, but you're keeping the framework, like you're part of the same. It's not the exact same belief system, because you've got these identity groups at the top and they have them at the bottom, and and they've got these at the top and you've got them at the bottom. But it's the same. You're looking at the world in the same way. It's the same operating system.
It's the similarity between fascists and communists. They kind of start here on opposites of the horseshoe, and then they circle around, and nope, they're at the same spot. That's essentially, it leads to the same thing. It leads to a dictatorial system that is oppressive of the individual and has no liberty, no rights, no free speech, no Second Amendment, no right to privacy. The group gets to bully, the group in power gets to bully everybody else. It's the same thing. Because why? They have the same view of power.
Right. And they also, they target Christians. It's not just the Uyghurs who they target. It's like any religion is an enemy to the state, a communist state, because the communism is a religion itself. It's like you can't have any challenging authority. And a belief in God is if you have a sincere belief in God, it makes you somewhat immune to tyranny of the state, because you're like, I believe in something bigger than you.
Yeah, if you believe in God, there's something above the government.
Yes.
And so they're going to tear down any belief in God, any objective belief in God, because they want to be God. And so that's why they attack Muslims. That's why they attack Christians. That's why they attack various religious groups, because they fundamentally oppose, like what you said, the state religion of communism.
Yes. So they're going to persecute. It's like, well,
or fascism.
I think we should give all this power to the state to do what they want, and we're just going to trust that they're going to keep targeting the identity groups we don't like.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, wait a minute. What happens when they start targeting the identity groups you're a part of?
There's a really good C.S. Lewis quote. Let me pull it up here. Kind of about this exact thing. Hold on.
I'm just going to thank Good Grief for $1.99. Says, woke right is confusing to low information normies. I could not agree more. I completely agree with you. That's why I don't like the phrase, actually, because there are some people who are on the left who bought into all the woke garbage, who are just slowly right now coming out of it. I know people who are just now starting to wake up to it, and they're just starting to learn what woke means. And this is why I don't like the phrase. And I hope that that some other phrase becomes more popular, but for right now, this is the one that's mostly being used online. And so it's sort of like how when I first started criticizing my old ideology, at the time, social justice was the most commonly used phrase. And so that's what I was calling it most often. And then woke became more colloquial, and that's what people started using. And so I switched to calling it woke so people would know what I'm talking about. And it's sort of similar. I hope another phrase.
But I think woke right just seems to me like the street lingo for what's going on. It kind of is a broad brush term that's encompassing a bunch of different movements not a bunch of different movements, but a bunch of different factions of this movement at the same time. So there's like the Catholic integralists. This would be like a Nick Fuentes and the Groypers. They're identitarians, anti-Semitic, just like it. But all these different movements kind of have the same theme. They're all for fascism in some varying shapes or forms, whether it's Catholic fascism or hardcore reform, Protestant fascism, or something else. There's the Christian nationalists. This would be like the Ogden Press, Eric Kahn, Stephen Wolfe, Joel Webin types, the hardcore Protestant reform guys, the defeating trash world guys, right? And then there's more of the secularist, I would say, fascist identitarians. That would be more of the Elijah Schaeffers and those kinds of people. So there's kind of all these, but they all correlate with each other. They kind of all piggyback off each other.
They do.
And this is the umbrella for this is woke right. And it's growing, and there's becoming more and more factions of it, I guess you could say. So it's not a perfect term, but I think it kind of encompasses holistically in some way what's going on. I think a better, at the end of the day, it's just fascism. We're talking about a kind of a new age American fascism, kind of a neo-American fascism with new American themes.
With American themes.
And then the fascists in the woke right are kind of arguing about which themes should be the central themes and which themes shouldn't. But it's just fascism, right?
And a
it's
lot of them are
fascism.
outright saying now, I am a fascist.
Oh, yeah. They're not shy about it. And they're not shy about the fact that they support critical theory either. Stephen Wolf, Andrew Isker, a lot of these guys have explicitly said this themselves. Okay, let me read the C.S. Lewis quote really quick. So he says, I'm a Democrat, not like I'm a Democrat, like I'm part of the Democrat Party. He's obviously is not what he's talking about. He means in terms of power dynamics, democracy. I am a Democrat because I believe in the fall of man. In other words, the sinful nature of man. I think most people are Democrats for the opposite reason. A great deal of democratic enthusiasm descends from the ideas of people like Rousseau, who believed in democracy because they thought mankind was so wise and good that everyone deserved a share in the government. The danger of defending democracy on those grounds is that they are not true. I find that they, human beings, are not wise and good. There are hardly any people wise and good enough to be trusted with the government of others. Hence, the reason why I'm a Democrat, the real reason for democracy is just the reverse. Mankind is so fallen that no man can be trusted with unchecked power. And then later on, he says something about how, Aristotle said that. Actually, let me pull up the rest of the quote. There's a good phrase at the end. Let's see.
Skillet actual for $10. I'll read this real quick. It says Candace Owens by presidential administration. Obama, woke. That's true. She was woke during the Obama administration. During Trump, she was based. During Biden, she was the Jews did this. We'll see how she mutates for Trump 47.
So the rest of the quote is, mankind is so fallen that no man can be trusted with unchecked power over his fellows. I think I read part of that already. And he says this later on. Aristotle said that some people were only fit to be slaves. I reject slavery because I see no men fit to be masters. So it's the idea of, and this is the idea of the Constitution and our whole political system here in the US, it's decentralizing power. It's saying that because it's recognizing the sinful nature of man. In other words, you see this all the way back in Genesis, it's a 10 or 11, the story of the Tower of Babel, where the people in ultimate rebellion against God came together in some like globalist state to defy God and to make a name for themselves. It says in defiance against God, and God separated the people and dispersed them and decentralized power. Essentially, I think for judgment. Because he originally commanded them to spread out because of the sinful nature of man. I think it's to spread out and fill the earth after Noah landed, and I'm sure a lot of you guys know that story. And they disobeyed, and they came together in Babylon and built this tower in defiance. God spread them out, decentralized power. I think that was largely for the protection of people, of individuals, because of how tyrannical that system was at the time. There's been a lot of historians that have written things about what it was like back then. People were we think tyranny is bad now. It was really bad back then. And it's about decentralizing power because of the sinful nature of man. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is the purpose of having a democratic republic like we have today, where there's the three branches of government and everything's separate and not one man has authority over others. But you see these woke right conservative Christians completely throwing that out the window and then wanting this like neo-integralist marrying of the church and state and this monarch sitting at the top on a throne dictating everybody in their Christian nation. It's like, have we not learned any lessons? No. Have we not read our Bibles and seen what this has led to? Have we not paid attention to history? It's the same thing that you see the Marxist left do. Oh yeah, Stalin and Mao, and they killed tens of millions of people, but we're going to do the same thing, sure, but we're just going to do it right this time. Our Marxism isn't going to lead to mass genocide. Yeah. It's the same thing.
So like communism hasn't been tried right. The real communism hasn't been tried. It is the same thing. And if you don't you gave some historical references and biblical references. I'm going to give a fictional one. My husband had never seen Game of Thrones. We've been watching. I know a lot of people didn't like the ending, but I thought the ending was very true to reality of what would
Well,
happen.
what's his name becomes king?
No, Daenerys, when
oh,
she's liberating the slaves, and the whole people were really upset because they're like, she's a good person. She believes in liberating slaves and everything. Why would the writers have her like set all the cities on fire and burn everyone alive, women and children? Why would they have her do that? Because that's what absolute power does to people. And there's a scene
yeah,
where she even
right.
says to Jon Snow, he's like, who gets to decide what's right and wrong? Because she's like, this, we're the good guys, so this is
It's like
okay.
we get to
And
decide,
and
basically.
she says,
Yeah,
"We get to decide. We have the power to decide." No, you don't.
right.
You can't take evil and substitute it for good, and say, "Well, I'm good, and so I can do this." And I thought that's a fictional reference. If people remember that series, like
Yeah,
absolute power corrupts.
I think that's a good example of someone who seemed to originally be fighting against corrupt tyranny and
Mhm.
government tyranny, but then became the monster she was fighting. Kind of
Yes,
what we were talking about before.
yes,
And you see that throughout history. See that all throughout history. There's example after example of that in the Bible. There's example after example of that throughout history in all governments and systems and nations. It's just part of our nature is we are corrupt, we're sinful. It's like what Romans 3 says, no one does good, no one is righteous, no one seeks after God. We're all fallen, we're all depraved, we all need Jesus. And so you'd think if these Christian nationalists, for example, wanted a Christian nation, they would recognize the fallen nature of man, as the Bible talks about, create a government system like what we have that is predicated on that principle of understanding that, hey, we all suck and we're all going to fight each other and tear at each other's necks unless we take power away from ourselves objectively. And then you'd think they would be more about evangelizing people and pushing for pushing to actually have people become Christians rather
like
than
you
just
need
pushing for political power.
Jesus, right?
Right, because that's actually what's going to start changing our sinful nature. So we're not going to be so violent and angry and obsessed with power and wanting to destroy each other. But again, you don't see that, just further proving the hypocrisy and the fraudulence of this whole thing.
Yeah. I've got one for you from Tracy. Gen X marks the spot. Thank you for the $5 super chat. She says, "Hey Mike, the cheese castle outside Racine is life." By the way,
Yes, I just drove past it the other day. That's hilarious. The Mars Cheese Castle. It's
I
a
have no.
Wisconsin staple.
Okay.
Uh,
And then last one, Randy Wallem for $10. Thank you, Randy. Says racism is the U.S.'s Achilles heel. The left used race as a cudgel forever, using now because racist is the worst thing a person can be called. The commies and left have always been racist. WR is a backdoor left. Oh, woke right is a backdoor left. It is.
yeah, right.
They're using the same thing. They're like, get with your race. Get with your
Yeah,
race, people.
yeah, right. That's always been the crux of cultural Marxism in the United States, is to focus on race. Race is the big, the big issue in the United States for some reason. And that's really what cultural Marxism is, right? It's
Yeah.
taking those economic principles from Marx and applying them to everything in culture. So it's taking this proletariat, bourgeoisie, rich versus poor dynamic. And that obviously doesn't really work in the West, as it didn't, as far as economics go, because there's this thing called the middle class that we have due to our free market system and our democratic republic that allows for individual liberty and opportunity in these things. And there's this middle class that's generally happy, generally likes their life, and isn't really falling for this economic based Marxism. And so the cultural Marxists thought, okay, maybe we should just try this with something else. Maybe we should try this with like gender or
And
race
race.
or these kinds of things. And voila, now we're here. And it worked.
Voila.
And so this is what's been going on. And now you see, and again, what that comment shows, which is accurate, is that these people are nothing more than cultural Marxists.
Yeah.
They're just hiding behind different terms and different faces and masks, but it's the same boogeyman on the other side.
Yeah, they're like basically saying to the woke left, they're like, yeah, the best way to look at the world is as a competition for power among racial groups. And we're going to choose our racial group. It's like, oh, you're the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a couple of quick questions from the chat, which I think we already answered. Salesworth says, isn't woke right, in quotes, just a form of collectivism? Yes.
Yeah. It's
And
just race-based collectivism, just like the woke left.
yep. And
Like
then
BLM.
Rosa, you answered this already. She said, is this an example of horseshoe theory?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forget the guy that came up with that term, horseshoe theory. I'm trying to remember. There's been a video about that going around on Twitter recently that I saw. That maybe I'll dig it up again and share it on my profile so you guys can check it out.
You guys go and check out Real Mick Olson. You can see his handle there on the screen, and also his YouTube channel is linked below. Um, I've got one final person to thank, and then we got to wrap this up. And Mick, I just want to say thank you so much for being available to talk about this with me. And
Yeah.
I was like, it's just going to be me screaming at the, the computer.
Well,
I
it
need a
worked
person
out
to
good
talk
because
to.
today I'm like sitting around waiting for the Babylon or not the B to get back to me on the. They're supposed to like send me a contract or something to sign, and I thought they were going to send it to me. I have to check my email after this. Maybe they sent it. So I've just been kind of chilling today, waiting to get it and waiting. So this worked out perfectly. I
Oh,
had time to
perfect.
do it.
Well, I
So
loved it, and it's been nice to have someone to bounce things off of and be like,
yeah,
are you seeing this? So I really
right.
appreciate it. Tracy, Gen X marks the spot. Thank you for the super chat for $5. Says it gets labeled as fascist movies, but Starship Troopers, the meritocracy they have and the ultimate checks and balances they have are epic. I don't even think I've seen that movie, Tracy, so I'll have to go watch
I
it.
haven't either. I'm uncultured.
Yeah. She always recommends good movies, though, so I'm willing to check it out. This is Mick's YouTube channel, the Real Mick Olson. Thank you, Robert. And his Twitter is there on screen.
Yep.
Thanks, Robert. Anything else you'd like to let us know before we wrap this up, or any other comments? Can you hear me?
Oh, I didn't know if you were talking to
Oh,
me or
sorry.
talking to
Oh,
the
you.
chat people in
Oh,
the
no,
chat.
you. Sorry.
uh,
Sorry.
I think we covered pretty much. I think we covered it. I think we got everything done. We
Cool.
covered a lot of ground here today, which is good. So people have a lot to chew on. I think at the end of the day, just again, this is what I've tried to do. And you'll probably notice if you go look at my Twitter, I'm just constantly pointing out the hypocrisy of these people. This is a big thing that worked, I think, culturally to dissuade people of embracing the woke left is to just constantly point out their hypocrisy. That worked for me before I knew what was going on. It was people like Matt Walsh or people like James Lindsay or people even like Ben Shapiro or Charlie Kirk back in the day that were constantly pointing at the hypocrisy of the woke left that got me to see, oh yeah, this is completely fraudulent and here's what this really is. I think we need to do the same thing again. So if you go to my Twitter, it's just I'm constantly highlighting how they're doing the exact same thing that they say that they're trying to fight. And that would be something I would just kind of always keep an eye out for if you're watching out for this stuff.
Yeah. Just look for the hypocrisy. It's like you shall know them by their fruits.
Right.
Not what they say, because a lot of these people say one thing 1 second and then say the exact opposite. And it's like, well, what do they really think?
Right. And a lot of times in the same day or in the same tweet, like we saw in the beginning of this episode. So
Randy says,
Jean-Pierre.
Jean-Pierre Fay. One last announcement for any knitters. February 1st, we're going to be doing a Deprogrammed meetup in Grapevine, outside of Grapevine, Texas. It's in South Lake, Texas. We're meeting at the Sweet Paris Creperie. I know a lot of you guys are going to be there for the Knitting McPearl retreat, and I hope to see you. And the information's on the screen. I'll also be posting online. So,
or you can come to the Mars Cheese Castle here in Racine. I don't live in Racine, but I live about an hour or so away. But
hey, if you ever do a meetup, we should do it
go
there.
Yeah, right. We'll do an anti-woke right meetup at the Mars Cheese Castle.
Yeah. Oh, Randy says, great guest. Followed him and recommended him to some friends in Wisconsin.
Hey, there you go. That's good.
Cool. Thanks, Randy. Cool. Teresa, stay warm. Yeah, stay warm, guys. I know that you guys laugh at me, but in Texas, if it's like 50 degrees, it's so cold. For me,
it's supposed to be -10 here on Monday, so
see, that'll
be great.
For me, I'm like, this is too much.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend.
Yep.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you later.
We'll see you.
Bye. Now there's an awkward moment where I got to find my outro. There we go.